Chapter 30. An alarm came on. The emergency lights in the ceiling flashed with bright red, and the piercing klaxon hurt her ears. Sarah looked at Dr. Sharma. "What the hell is that?" "Fire alarm," the doctor said. She clicked her mic. "Alpha, you still in maintenance?"
"Alpha to control. Affirmative. Over."
"Can you tell what the hell's going on? Over." Pause. Perkins' voice came back, raw urgency beneath his words.
"Fire in a fourth-floor operating room. No luck in contacting the nurses' station up there. The sprinkler systems are online and should be able to put it out. Over."
"Any idea what caused it?" "Over."
"Negative. No way to tell. Over."
A radio crackled and then went dead. "Alpha?" No response. "Alpha, this is... Lieutenant Celian, this is Dr. Shannon Moore. Do you read me?" She frowned. "Dr. Moore, how did you get this frequency?" "There isn't much time, Lieutenant. I need you to listen carefully and save your questions for later. Do you understand?" The woman had the arrogant air of authority, the kind Sarah had been trained to respect. "Affirmative," she said. "Just keep in mind I don't know who the hell you are. Just know that I'm in charge, Lieutenant. The hostel has broken out into several floors of the hospital." "Several?" she asked. "What do you—" "Please," Moore's voice broke over hers. "Just listen. There is no longer a single hostel. I can't explain it, but we have at least half a dozen we know of. The fire was caused by one of them in the OR. It burst into flames upon exiting a waste disposal drain." "What about the others?" "The fifth-floor diagnostics lab has one. We've already lost video of the others. This means the entire hospital is contaminated. All patients and staff are at great risk. Do you understand?" Sarah's mind raced. Multiple hostiles? Several floors? "What kind of support can you provide? My team only has 8 members." "The area outside the hospital is in lockdown. No additional personnel will be exposed to this contagion. My team will provide logistical and surveillance support only. We do have spotters monitoring the building with audio and infrared." She ground her teeth. "You've got to be kidding me. You can't give us any more support than that?" "No, Lieutenant, I can't. And if you can't get the situation under control in the next 2 hours, the U.S. government will take care of it for you, and everyone in that hospital is going to die." Gooseflesh ran up her spine. Moore's voice was ice cold, deadly serious, matter of fact without animosity or enmity. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. Pause. "Let's make sure it doesn't come to that, shall we?" "This is—" "The clock is ticking, Lieutenant. We have control of the security system and have locked out all local access. You will be allowed out of the trauma adjunct and into the main building and provided any additional access required. I suggest you get going." "How do I contact you?" "We are monitoring your frequency. If you need me, I'll be here. Get moving, soldier. Do your duty. Save lives. Moore out." The radio went silent and then crackled back to life.
"Alpha. Boss, you there? Over."
She took a deep breath. "Go ahead, Alpha." Perkins paused and then spoke clearly and slowly.
"Boss, we all heard the transmission. Orders? Over."
Something clicked in her head. She was back in the Middle East leading a fire team through dark, deserted streets, ears attuned to every sound, eyes searching the thick shadows for any and all threats. "Boss?" Perkins asked again. She nodded to herself. "Alpha, get your asses up those stairs into the main building. Floor 1. The team will meet you there. Over."
"Acknowledged, boss."
"You're going to stay here," she said to Sharma. Sarah pointed at the 2 CDC doctors. "I need you 2 to get off your asses and help me figure out how to fight this thing." Mathis blinked. "How the hell do we do that?" Her teeth flashed in a dangerous smile. "That's your mission. Help me save some fucking lives." Harold shook her head. "Lieutenant, we have no samples. There's nothing we can do to figure this out. You still have a CDC asset outside, correct? He has a sample?" The 2 doctors looked at one another. "That's correct," Mathis said. "But we lost contact with him. Let me see what I can do about that." Chapter 31. Sarah marched out of the hallway, troops in tow. When she reached the partition separating the main building from the adjunct, the heavy, bulletproof glass slid upward. She glanced at the video camera in the corner and frowned before returning her gaze to the rest of the men. They're watching us. For now, that's a good thing. When it stops being a good thing, she said and narrowed her eyes. I want any camera you see destroyed, understood? The men nodded as one. Let's go. They jogged into the hospital's main lobby to the corner stairwell. The door opened as they approached, Givens and Perkins appearing at the entrance. The two men wore grim expressions. She nearly smiled. Sarah walked through the stairwell door and Perkins closed it behind her. The stairwell door clicked and then boomed. Both she and Perkins turned and stared at it. What the? Perkins started to say. Their radios crackled. More here. Just to let you know, we're locking down the stairwells. Your team will be allowed access, but all civilians will be locked in on their floors. Elevators are out of order. Acknowledged. She clicked off her mic and cursed under her breath. Pair up, she said. Alpha, you know the drill. Perkins sidled past the other men and joined Givens. Without a word, they traveled up the stairs to the second-floor landing, and the other men paired into their teams. Givens took up position beside the door, one foot on the first stair leading to the landing. Perkins had his hand out, fingers clutching the door handle. More, open floor 2, Sarah said. The door banged as the emergency lock deactivated. Go! Perkins swung open the door and held it. Givens peered out into the hallway to the right, and then left. Civilians, he said. As if on cue, the sound of concerned voices filtered through the open door. Barely a beat passed before Sarah said, Check your fire, men. Deploy. Givens stepped all the way through the door, Perkins behind him. Beta and Charlie followed next. Sarah and O'Malley were the last through the threshold, her partner closing the door behind them. It immediately locked. Several nurses dressed in scrubs milled about the long hallway. A security guard turned and glanced at the SWAT team. He put his hand on his holster, but didn't pull. Houston SWAT, Sarah yelled at him. Do not reach for your weapon or we'll put you down. One hospital staff member shouted in surprise, and several others dove into open rooms. The guard gulped and then slowly raised his hands. She pointed at him. Are you the only guard on this floor? The man nodded. Was on my rounds when the door's locked. Haven't been able to get down the stairs and the elevators are out. He blinked at her. What the hell is going on? Good question, she thought. There are several hostiles in the building. We need to get the civilians safe before we engage them. Understood? He shook his head. We haven't seen any. If you had, you'd be dead, she said in a low tone. I need you to keep everyone calm and guard the patients. How many on this floor? The guard thought for a moment. The main patient floors are upstairs. This is just the clinics, physical rehab, and antenatal testing. Floors 4 and 5 are the ones you want. Of course they are. What's above us? Maternity. Shit. Okay, is there a space on this floor that has metal doors or is enclosed? He nodded. Clinical studies. Has a couple of labs that should do. Good. Sarah looked at her men. That's where we're going first. We need to clear that section of the building and get everyone in there. Understood? Boss, they said in unison. She turned back to the guard. Lead the way, and when we get there, I need you to wait outside. If you hear gunfire, I want you to get these people to the other side of the floor. Understood? The guard paled. Yes, ma'am. Good. Let's go. The guard walked past her on unsteady legs. Sarah beside him as the team spread out behind her. Any idea how many people are currently in the clinical studies area? No, he said, but I guarantee it can't be many, not this time of night. Maybe 4 or 5 people. Good, she said. They walked to the end of the long hallway. She took note of every person staring at them from the doors of the clinics. Most of them were janitorial staff with just a few nurses and assistants. When they reached the hall corner, the guard led them up the adjoining hallway. A heavy door with a card scanner stood a few yards away. The guard pulled out his key card and approached the door. He was half a meter away when the red light on the door blinked out and turned green. The lock clicked open. The guard stopped in his tracks, frowning. Sarah looked up. A security camera stared down at her from above the door. "How did—" "It's going to happen a lot tonight," she said. "Remember what I told you. Stay here." The guard said nothing but moved aside. Celia turned to her team. "Alpha and Beta, take any areas on the left. Charlie and Delta on the right. Stay sharp and watch the shadows." Her men said nothing. "Let's do this." Givens stood beside the door. Perkins reached out, nodded once, twice, and pulled it open. Twilight greeted them. Most of the lights in the large room were off. She looked left and saw a bank of small cubicles and 3 lab areas. The right side had several examination rooms and another lab. The area was quiet, and more importantly, the carpet was intact. Alpha crouch walked forward, their weapons pointed in front and slightly lowered. Perkins moved to the wall of cubicles and peered over the dividers. "Cubicles look clear," he said in a low voice. Alpha and Beta continued their patrol. Charlie moved forward to clear the rooms, Sarah and O'Malley behind them. She fought the urge to watch the other teams and instead focused on searching for hostiles. Charlie crept forward to the first clinic room. When Schneck reached the door, he flattened himself against the jamb, peered into the darkened room, and nodded to Epp. Epp walked sideways into view of the opening, his rifle light pointing into the gloom. He slid a hand across the wall and the clinic room lit up. He walked inside, Schneck a meter behind him. O'Malley and Sarah took up cover positions near the doorway. O'Malley's eyes flicked to her, and she gazed back at him with a stony expression. The junior team member broke eye contact and resumed searching for targets. With any luck, they wouldn't find any. The room was unnaturally quiet. Givens could never explain how or why, but he always felt something when people were around. It was like an electrical field he could sense. Whether it was walking the streets between dark buildings or clearing a room, he could always tell if someone was there. But here, there was nothing except for his team members. That was worrisome to say the least. Givens pointed to the first room. Perkins walked right behind while Beta took up positions to the side, a standard sweep and clear formation when entering a room where you had limited sight lines. It was also his favorite part of the job. Sensing the enemy behind walls, taking the risk of going through the door first, made his veins thrum with adrenaline, and the reptile part of his brain screamed with fear. It made him feel alive. When Perkins was in position, Givens turned slightly so he could see into the room beyond the door. Like the others, it was dark. The dim light of the single overhead shining down on the admissions desk in the middle of the area did little to banish the shadows. Givens shined his rifle light along the floor, and then slowly upward. The carpet was intact. So was the wall. A stand-up desk sat in the middle of the room, and a few pictures of little kids hung along the back wall. Givens nodded, and Perkins stepped in full view of the room. He waved his rifle and scanned the other side. "Lights," Perkins whispered. Givens slid a hand along the wall and found the switch. The fluorescent overheads came to life and chased away the shadows. Perkins slipped into the room, Givens beside him. They searched and found nothing, no trace of the creature or humans. "Where is everyone?" Perkins asked. Givens said nothing and headed back out of the room. "Leave the light on," he drawled. He turned the corner, Perkins behind him, and headed to the second office. The others followed. Schneck and Depp quickly cleared the room and left the lights on. Sarah and O'Malley stepped aside to let the 2 men out, and froze. She smelled the sickening odor of rotten meat. In the trauma center, it had been barely there. But now, it singed her nostrils. "What is that?" O'Malley asked. Sarah turned her head to look at the other teams still creeping down the hallway. She clicked her mic. "Givens?" "I smell it, boss," his voice whispered over the line. "All teams, hostile in the area. I repeat, hostile in the area." Instead of voice acknowledgement, a series of 7 clicks responded back. She tapped Schneck on the shoulder and then pointed ahead. He nodded and walked forward, Epp just to his side. The next room a mere 3 meters away. If the damned thing could hear them, it knew people were here. Or maybe it saw in a different way than humans. Either way, her hackles were up, and that strange mix of excitement and fear vibrated in her veins. The smell of something burning added to the stench. Schneck paused mid-step and then continued forward. Beneath the hum of the central air, she heard a crackling sound like a paper bag crumpling. It was creepy enough to make her shiver, but she couldn't tell where it was coming from. Click, click, click. Sarah tapped her mic twice. The 3 men with her halted their progress. She didn't have to look at the other side of the room to know that Alpha and Beta had done the same. Click, click, clickety-click, click. The sounds of something sharp on tile, or stone, or hard plastic. It didn't echo as if it was made on metal. The smell intensified. She turned and looked over at Team Alpha on the opposite wall. Givens was still facing forward, but Perkins was looking her direction. She held up her hand and slowly flipped it at the back of the hallway. Perkins nodded and tapped Givens on the shoulder. Sarah tapped Schneck, and he started forward again. She breathed slowly through her nose and then let the air flow out through her mouth in a steady exhale. It was back there. It was waiting for them. She suddenly wished they'd been smart enough to find the wall switches for the entire clinic area. That would have made this much... Something moved in the shadows down the hallway. It wasn't at ground level, but a meter in the air. Schneck saw it too and came to a stop. Epp raised his rifle and pointed the strong light at the gloom. The waving thing looked like a hooked tail, but it was difficult to see any other features. "Take the shot," she whispered, and braced herself for the round to fire. Epp took a deep breath, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. And then all hell broke loose.